Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be talking about the Community Ideas Forum that is out there on the Fabric / Power BI site, community site. And as you can see here, we are the matrix table grand totals of measures. We are currently in 18th, number 18th most favorite idea. We're actually only about 5 or 6 votes away from overtaking Phil Seamark's idea right here, moving up to 17th place. I know it doesn't look like it, but the community ideas site doesn't properly report um, like merged. It used to be that like when you had merged ideas that were all merged into one, it properly reported the correct total. But shocking, right? Microsoft can't get totals right. So this no longer reports the correct total. There's actually 178 votes missing out of this total. So anyway, so if you do the math on it, we're about 5 or 6 votes short. So would love to move up to number 17. That would be great. Yeah, so that is what we're going to be talking about today. So what I did is I went through and kind of similar to what I did with I think issues and quick measure gallery and things like that. I pulled the information, I scraped the information off of the ideas site. And you can see here I've cleaned up my model or how I did this basically. And I have my get ideas function, right? Which is right there. And I kind of created that. If you look in past videos, I'll show how I created that function. Got my parameters. Now I made some mistakes, I think. So when I was doing this, so there's actually like 3,502 pages worth of ideas out there. So what I thought, well, I might get timeout errors, this and that. I probably overthought it. And I was thinking, well, if I break it up into like 500-page chunks, right? Then one, if it comes to it, right, I can load up each one individually and then disable loading or disable refresh on them, and then get them all loaded up into the semantic model, and then union them all up into via DAX, right? But it didn't work out so well because what happened is, and then I actually appended them in Power Query. And what it did was it basically just sat there and a long stretch of evaluating. And then it basically loaded up 10 ideas at a time in like 30-second or 40-second intervals, right? So I thought maybe this would this would basically put it in parallel, go out and grab all the stuff, all at the same time, and then the append would be very quick. That is not what turned out. So anyway, I probably just made it all more complicated and worse. The worst part about it was, though, is that so it took like 4 hours to load the ideas, and then I realized, oh, I want the completed ideas too, because I need to do that for analysis. Well, so I didn't really change this at all. I just duplicated it. I disabled the refresh on it, created the completed ideas, save, close and apply, and it reloaded all of the ideas again. So it was another 4 or 5 hours before. So it took the entire day yesterday just to get the ideas loaded up. But the interesting thing about it is unlike like quick measures and issues, there is a ton of data and analysis that can be done with the ideas form. So without further ado, and don't judge me too harshly because this is like an initial pass, just like exploring the data and seeing what I could determine. One of the surprising things I found is that it very much supports the idea that Microsoft basically has just completely abandoned Power BI at this point. And we'll get into it. All right, so again, don't judge too harshly. This is just initial pass. I've got 7 pages here, just trying to figure out what I could figure out. So first thing is that there's 35,020 ideas out there currently total that have not been completed. And the completed ideas are only 1,416, so that gives you less than 4% a completion rate as far as ideas that have been completed suggested. Now, this number is very high. Actually, it's actually a much lower number than this, in my opinion. If you're going to submit an idea and get it, try to get it to actually Microsoft to actually implement it. Ideas have been open for an average. The ones that are open have been open for about 4.62 years, a little over 4.5 years. They've been open. And what's interesting about all of this is that, again, this number I think is higher than it should be, and we'll see reasons why. But for one immediate reason is Power BI user, which in Power BI ideas admin and onboarding user, which I think are all Microsoft accounts, right? So it's like there's 56, 23, and 10. So there's quite a bit of um, the ideas that are out there. And this is completed ideas. So if you're talking about Microsoft, if you're talking about your own ideas being submitted out there and the completion percentage of that, Microsoft is Microsoft has the three highest users, right? That have had completed ideas. The number of completed ideas, right, are all Microsoft, other than this blank up here is basically people that suggested an idea and then left the forums and their accounts no longer there, etc. That's why we get the blanks here. Okay, so now the way that the open ideas break down is that there's currently 3 in backlog. There's over 22,000 that need votes, which is 64%. New is 11,000, which is a little over 30%. There's only 0.63%, 222 are planned, and then there's 455 that are under review, which is a little over 1%. This was an attempt to kind of, based on the vote count, what's the chance that something's going to be completed or not completed? And the completion percentage is pretty simple, right? I put it down here, I think. Percent completed. Very simple formula, right? Count rows and completed ideas, count rows and Power BI ideas plus completed, divide the two, gives me my percentage. Okay, so that's how that's done. Now, I'll show you in later pages that I came up with a way to bucket these votes into like 10 and 100 chunks, like buckets, essentially, which I think make the results a lot clearer. So can ignore this for right now, but it's kind of funny to me that, if you have 0 votes, you have a much higher percentage chance of having it completed than if you have 1 vote. But that's just really due to the number of vote of not completed ideas that only have 1 vote versus those that have 0. Okay, so I'll get in trouble by Nick, Deborah for probably all of this, but again, this is a first pass at this, and I know I shouldn't be using dual axis charts and all that sort of stuff, but here's a graph between the years and you have to understand about the years is the only date that I have is when the idea was submitted. I don't have a date as far as when it was completed. So what you can see here is that the most in 2015 was when the most ideas were completed, right? 365 versus there were 1,480 submitted. Versus, I guess I should say, in 2015, ideas that were submitted in 2015, there were 365 of those have been completed. Okay, and of the ideas that were submitted in 2015, there is 1,480 that are not completed, giving a percent completed rate of almost 20%, right? The interesting thing is the highest completion rate is actually 2014. So if you were lucky enough to have the foresight to submit an idea in 2014, you have a greater than 50% chance that idea is now actually implemented in Power BI. So you can see that this graph is kind of interesting. You can see that it obviously goes down exponentially depending on what year you submitted in, right? This was 55% completion rate in 2015 for ideas submitted in 2015. There's only a 20%. Then it drops down to 8. Then it drops down to 4%, right? And just keeps dropping down to basically near 0. The most ideas that were ever submitted was 4,422 in 2019, right? So, there's some little interesting bits of information. Ideas submission kind of fell off and then picked back up again. It's kind of down in 2024, but we don't have a full year, obviously. But I don't know if we're going to get 1,000 ideas submitted in the rest of this year, maybe. This again is the user count. So people like Marco Russo have had 7 ideas completed, right? These are completed ideas. So I thought that was kind of interesting to put together. All right, so let's go into page 10. This is where I think it gets kind of interesting. So these are my buckets, and this is the 100. This is basically what I did was I created buckets for 100, and the way I did that was via calculated columns. So let's see, 100s bucket, 10s bucket. So here's the formula I did for that, right? 10s bucket trunk votes divided by 10 plus 1 times 10. And the hundreds bucket is the same, right? So the way to look at these is basically the hundreds bucket. If you have 0 to 99 votes, you're in the hundreds bucket. Like, so first 100 values of vote total, right? Possible. And so the 200 bucket is 100 through 199, and so on and so on and so on. And why did I implement these as a calculated columns? I'm sure there's somebody out there going, no, calculated columns. It's the worst. And I didn't share my screen. And no, I did share my screen. Okay. Well, I thought I was recording this and hadn't shared my screen. Anyway, so there's somebody out there yelling and screaming that I use calculated columns and you should never use calculated columns. Well, I use calculated columns. And you know why? Because I didn't realize I needed this until after I'd loaded up all the data. So if I would have used Power Query, then I would have had to and added this column in Power Query. I would have had to wait another 4 to 5 hours to load up all the data, and I didn't want to do that. So anybody that talks in absolutes is absolutely wrong, is the bottom line on that. Nobody that speaks that like you should never do this is ever correct in all situations. It's not how it works. So yes, I use calculated columns. I'm not ashamed to admit it. All right, so that's how I ended up getting the calculated column, or these buckets of values. You can see there's a clear, as you go up, there's at 100. If you're in bucket 100, there's a 3% chance that your idea is completed, right? Versus if you're 200, it immediately jumps up to 20%, and then 25% in the 300 bucket. So there's a clear progression and trend as you get more votes on your idea. The percentage chance that your idea is going to be completed goes up, right? So that's the hundreds bucket. This is the tens bucket. It kind of shows that it's a similar trend. The interesting thing about this is that you can zoom in on this using this zoom thing, which I find this really clunky, quite honestly. Like, I don't know why they didn't do it where you could just basically be like, I would have much preferred, like, how you do drill down, like have a little icon here for zoom and click that, and then you could use your scroll wheel to like zoom in and out. That would seem much more natural to me. Doing it this way is really clunky in my opinion. But you can, again, even at the tens bucket level, you can see 2%. If it's 10 votes, it jumps up to double that. At 20, doubles again at 30, kind of. But it's trends, basically, the more votes you have, the more likely that you are going to get your idea completed. Pretty simple. I think this shows that very well. Okay, so this was another attempt using a scatter plot. Again, kind of interesting. You can see some of the trends here. Like below this level, it's mostly all blue and some orange, right? So you have new orange is new ideas, and blue are needs votes, right? So you can see but as it goes up the value, so this is 100 needs votes, this is 200 needs votes. You can see that it goes from 4% to 23.88% to 30%, 35%, right? I mean, it continually kind of increments up as you get more votes, even within a category, if you will. There are some anomalies down here, like planned and under review. So this is a planned custom order for legend. It's planned. It's got a huge number of votes, but it's not implemented yet. They have multiple y-axis on a chart. I thought we already had that, but that's okay. I'm sure dynamic date slicer. I do have descriptions and everything in here as far as the actual votes and ideas go. But anyway, so this is so I thought this was kind of interesting. And then in terms of the pattern, right? As you get above this, it's mostly dominated by under review and planned, right? And a little bit of, I don't know where the backlog is. Oh, the backlogs appear right up there. So there is your backlog. And anything that's in backlog, right, has a 99% chance of being completed, right? So most of the stuff that gets in the backlog gets completed, essentially, is what that says. All right, So anyway, this is again just kind of trying to explore the data and stuff like that. Let's take a look. This actually puts the same data that's in that bubble chart and the line charts into a table, right? More or less. So this is your 100 bucket, 3% chance, 200 bucket, 20%, 25, etc. What's interesting is that you do have some anomalies here, like you have two ideas that fall into the 4200 bucket, which are these two: load data from Office 365 Planner, and there's a 0% completion rate for votes that have very high. This is going to be your top vote getters, collapse, headers, and light and dark interface. Right, this one is your default selected slicer by tile, by value configuration. Right, so there are some interesting kind of anomalies. One of the ones that you'll see up here that I found interesting was, even at 1900 votes, there's only a 28% completion rate in the 1900 bucket. And guess what that includes? That includes, yes, matrix and table grand totals with measures, right? So export charts directly to Excel, etc. So for whatever reason, that band just has a much lower percentage rate than the bands immediately surrounding it and above it, essentially. But of course, that's just our luck, right? This was interesting. I found very interesting in terms of users. How many have been complete? How many of their suggested ideas have been completed versus not completed? What's their completion rate? It's kind of similar to the first page, but then I included what I called a power ranking, because if you submitted one vote, one idea, and it got completed, then you're going to be at 100%. So I invented this power ranking, and all the power ranking is, you can see it here. It is just by completion percentage multiplied by the number of completed ideas. So when you do this, then it becomes, I think, a little more interesting in terms of, like, for example, this individual, they have had, well, if I can get rid of, there we go. They've had 8 completed ideas, 5, ideas that haven't been completed, but they have a 61% basically win rate. So they have the highest individual power ranking at 4.92. Apparently, this person is submitting some really good ideas, or at least Microsoft thing, or they work for Microsoft. Who knows, right? There's kind of the Marco Russo shows up here, right? He has a 38%, almost 39% win rate. He's had 7 ideas completed, right? So basically, this ends up favoring people that have had multiple ideas completed. Now, the one that really surprised me, though, I'm not gonna lie, there was no way I thought I was gonna see this name. I was like, I actually know this guy. So, like, I know this person personally, and I've worked with this person for years, on and off. And I never thought that this person's name was gonna show up on this list. So what I did is I created this one, and I just filtered it down. And Netezza support, add Netezza support as a data source, add tiles to dashboard from on-premises state table. I don't know what that one means, but I understand exactly why this person was interested in this particular feature. So anyway, I just found that one. All right, let's continue on here. Let's see. What was this one? What was I trying to do with this one? Um, completed vote. Oh, this was basically around votes. What users have the most vote totals, right? The most completed vote totals and the most non-completed vote totals. So you can see here that, like, Marco Russo on his completed votes has like 7,000, over 7,000 votes on his completed ideas, which are 7. So basically, on average, each of these had 1,000 votes. Now you can see the difference here on the not completed votes, right? He had 4,000, and there's 11 of those. So basically, each one of these had less than 400 votes currently, versus the ones that were completed are 1,000, right? So anyway, put that together. Here's the top 20, right? In terms of the data reported, you can see, matrix table grand totals with measures is number 20, but it's really higher than that because Microsoft doesn't know how to calculate totals correctly, in table matrix visuals as well as in the ideas form. Okay, so last one, and this one is the one that I think shows Microsoft has completely abandoned Power BI. So there's actually a type in the ideas in terms of what the idea is about. Is it core? Is it data factory? Is it Power BI? Is it real-time intelligence? Is it Synapse? It's funny to me that Fabric doesn't appear on this list. I guess that would be core. I don't know. But interestingly, so you can see, and this is why I think, again, this 3.83%, like that's your odds of getting your idea completed, is very much too high, because it's taking into account like ideas that were submitted back in 2014 and 2015 and 2016, which have a much higher percent completion rate. So if you were to submit your idea today, right, it would be a much lower number. One, because Microsoft didn't submit it through one of the 3 users that they have. But two, I mean, look at the completion rate down here for an idea that was submitted in 2024. There's only been one completed out of 2,488 that are not completed, right? So it's a 0.04% rate. And that's the same for 2023, 0.05. And you can see the dramatic drop off, like getting into 2022, which is basically where you're starting to have like the precursors of what we call Fabric today, right? And then the announcement in 2023, and then now obviously 2024, you see the dramatic decline in the percent completion rate. And it's really evident, like, so in 2023, for ideas that were core, right, had a 9% completion rate. For Data Factory, had a 14% completion rate. For real-time intelligence, 14%. For Synapse, 2%, right? Versus Power BI, 0.05%. And that's like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude difference, right? And the same goes true for, again, 3%, 4%, 6%, or almost 7, 2.5%, 0.04%. So essentially so like 12, 15, 4, 3, 2, the least number of ideas completed. 7, 7, 2, 5, 1, right? The least number of ideas completed on the most, by far the most ideas. So the Power BI community is still actively engaged with Power BI and submitting ideas, but Microsoft has no interest in actually implementing those ideas. That is what these numbers tell me. So maybe you feel differently, but that is all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.